My name is Chad Benson. I'm the Director of Education for Innovative Fitness. I've been the Director of Education now for 3 different organizations along the way. So I was sort of reflecting on my own path recently, and I realized how many different organizations now that I've actually contributed educationally to. And, the result of that is having built now 3 different educational platforms, finally, obviously building my own educational platform, which is the Move platform. Mm-hmm. So you obviously took the Move Better certification. Yes. Back in CamFit Pro in Toronto last year. And then prior to that, I had built the Accelerate program, which is also the twist conditioning education platform. Yes. And the interesting part about all this is that you start to realize, like, what you're doing is just you're constantly looking for different springboards and different databases to attach yourself to in order to be able to have the greatest amount of impact. Yes. The material itself just evolves itself over time, but the reality is, I think what I've learned over the years and where I think is really important is that it's all about relationships and collaboration. Yes. Yeah. And when you're in a situation like I am now at Innovative, where I feel like my boss and I just collaborate on projects, it's a great place to be because it gives me the freedom to explore whatever avenue of education I so choose to go down to. And as it stands right now, I'm just moving down the movement progression platform, which is helping people move more successfully at whatever age and at whatever stage you're at, helping people move from low function to high function, whatever that is relative to their current state and need. Yes. So it's been really cool evolution. So
yeah, no, exactly. In the social work world, the term that they're playing with now beyond collaborate is collective interest. Mm-hmm. I'm still trying to understand more about that, but it's almost like, okay, collaborate is fantastic, and collective interest is almost like another level of pulling more people into the room with that interest of understanding, like aging well or understanding whatever. So in the social world, it has a different context, but within the fitness world, that's like the continuation of this collaboration piece. And I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know how, like, are you familiar with that term or anything that's coming along with that?
Not specifically the term, but I totally understand the value of the term and where I see it, and from my perspective from it, and I agree wholeheartedly, by the way, and I think that is a better utilization of the terms in a way that understands that really what we are we always talk about inclusivity. We've always been a huge, that word has been used a lot and probably misused in many ways. Yes. But the reality is inclusivity really is along the path of similar interests with people. Yes. So people will start listening when you're able to connect with them in a specific way. Right. So if we have a common interest, that's often the place of intersection for people to listen to you. Yes. So I do believe that interest is, like, for me, I'd be very honest, like, when it comes to fitness and education, I have a very specific interest. My interest is to help people move better. Yes. Right. That obviously has a lot of different tentacles attached to it, and there's a lot of different pathways to that success. But I've always felt that my goal is to help you move successfully, and if that is athletic performance, then that may help you get a scholarship. That may help you get a new contract in the NHL. It may help you win a gold medal at the Olympics. Yes. If it's an injury, then it may help you resolve the pain. It may help you move better because of postural changes, and the result is that you still have a more effective life and that you have better energy and you have more of an improved mindset around the ability to be able to get up every day and just enjoy very simple activities of life. Yes. That probably been taken away from you because you've had debilitating back pain or knee pain or shoulder pain, right? So for me now, I just realized that moving athletically is a long continuum, so that in one sense, it's inclusive in the sense that I do believe everyone should strive to move better. And I hope that people feel that way, but I'm also realistic to recognize that, that interest in movement and passion for daily activity isn't the case for everybody. Yes. So when it comes to interest, you're always looking at, like, well, where's the pathway of intersection that will help that person hear your message in a way that inspires them to want to move better, and whatever that is for them. So I think it's kind of an interesting point is that, you'll only interest people that are, you're speaking to on a personal level.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle that most people, when you're trying to build a product and when you're trying to build an education platform, when you're trying to help the industry find its way and find its niche, that a lot of people try and be all things to all people. And I say that's not the case. You really do want to find a passion and go down that path. There's so many, especially now, obviously, using this virtual platform that we're all sort of accustomed to, and the pivot that is resulting from COVID. I think it's essential for people to realize, like, find your niche, find your passion, speak truthfully and authentically to it. And that's, I think, where that common interest part comes in.
Yes, no, I agree. And even this weekend, I was talking with a gentleman, and we were saying, like, in my business, and I was saying, well, I'm doing a lot of Pilates and working with this and that. And he's like, well, don't make yourself so narrow that you can't help everybody, And he starts bragging about, oh, I did this in my business, and I had this, and I did this and this, and it's so broad. It's like, okay, well, I understand that I can do all those things, but at the same time, I want to be known for this thing. So I can have all those things. I can help with someone with weight loss and general, health, but then I also want to be able to do this specific thing. So I can have this broad scope, but then also a pinpoint accurate focus, and that be my unique, sales proposition, like my niche, my whatever, my area of specialty. So I agree with that. Like, we need to be, especially in this era too, that now with, everything, like what you said there, that's bang on. And it's funny because people will see me do a post like I did this morning with some Viper work, and they're like, oh, you still work out? It's like, yes, I do. Because they only see Pilates stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the reality is, a lot of people just see me doing very athletic things, and they don't realize that oftentimes the things that are happening behind the camera are things like using percussion devices on myself every morning and doing a daily stretch routine and various forms of yoga built into my practice, because it's not as cachet and maybe not as novel to people, and it's probably not my area of specific passion. So therefore, what I'm sharing is the stuff that I'm most authentically aligned with and passionate about. Yes. So, it's interesting, and same with you. Like, I think it's great that you're recognized for a skill set and that you're able to stay authentic and passionate about that, because the reality is, if you try and diversify your portfolio too much, there's going to be a lot of pieces in that puzzle that you're not really authentically aligned to, and the result will be that you're never really going to get the message across in a way that people are going to start listening with Dumbo-sized ears. And that's really what you want to do. You want to be able to speak to people in a way that their ears light up because they can see your personal passion, and that they can see that you clearly have experienced enough to be able to pass along information that are going to help them down that journey that maybe they're a little more juvenile moving towards than you are, and that your experience is going to help them shortcut and overcome some of the obviously obstacles that normally come along with before you have success.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And it's interesting, and just hearing you talk about this, Chad, like, you're saying things like authentic passion and move better. And those are simple terms that get so cloudy when you see all this stuff in social media about body shaming and images, and there's a lot of stuff that happens out in social media when it comes to fitness that makes the industry seem so ugly and so complicated and so superficial. But what you're saying is so simple and it's so pure. Just move better.
Yep. Yeah. Just every day, just want to move a little better, and that's how I feel. And at the end of the day, there's a continuum from moving better to moving athletically for me. But the reality is, the most important piece of that puzzle is just getting up and feeling energized and feeling able. If I feel able, yes, then I can take on whatever I want along that continuum.
Yes.
And that continuum, is acrimonious, but it's at the same time, it's very simple in the sense that it moves all of us from low function to high function. And the idea, obviously, is that for me, I want people to live their best lives, whatever that is. So when I wake up, if I don't feel enthusiastic about life, if I don't feel enthusiastic about my ability to go and attack the day, yes, it deters and takes away from any contributions I'm going to make to the people I'm going to involve myself with today. Right. The minute that I feel great, I feel better, I'm able to move better, it makes my psyche spring into action. And once my psyche springs into action, then it takes over everything I'm doing. So forget just movement, forget exercise. It makes me want to be a better version of myself. And then in that same way, because of my level of influence I have, I use that then to help other people feel the same way. And if I can touch one person, like today when I came on here, like I don't care how many people are live with us right now. If I can make one person motivated to go and attack their day in a slightly better way, to go and do something that they weren't feeling like doing yesterday, but now motivated to go do today, whatever that is, in whatever aspect of their life that it is. Forget fitness. It's irrelevant to me.
Yes.
I'd be super happy to know that one message comes in and go, I listened to you talk to Martin yesterday, and I'm so excited to say I did this. Or I took a step towards getting pain out of my elbow joint, or I took a step towards doing SAQ, speed, agility, quickness drills, because I haven't been doing that for a long time. And you're right, when I do it, I feel better.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. What's your thoughts on like goals, daily habits, those things that like you just do like rote memory every day to get you to that place?
Yeah, it's great. That's a great question. And, something I was actually contemplating today as I was coming here, because I was thinking about some nutritional stuff for some clients of mine that I'm actually going to see this morning. For me, I think it's essential to set goals early on in the habit building process.
Okay.
Right? So, we've all heard the BHAGs, right? And I think this is a mistake we make oftentimes, the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goals. I think a lot of people are like, almost over commercialized, and they're thinking that you have to do something glamorous, that something big has to happen. Like, what's that thing I'm going for in 5 years? Like, where do I see myself in 5 years? I'm like, where do you see yourself next week?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Like, what are you going to do this week that's going to make your life move forward one step next week? And you can still have a big goal, but I think people need to focus on the habits. So whatever that goal is, if it's losing 10 pounds, if it's moving more athletically, if it's be pain-free in your knee that hasn't been for a long period of time, recognize that it's a journey, and that every one of those journeys is a series of small habitual steps.
Yes.
So early on, you just got to write down, like, what are the 4 habit changes I'm going to make? What are they going to be? You have to remind yourself of them every day. Once you're done performing them and you feel slightly better, or you're moving slightly better, or you're moving in a direction that makes you feel better, you have to be grateful for those moments. So there is a self-reflection piece to this puzzle too. Yes. So you've got to set your habits up. You got to make 1 or 2 small changes. Don't go for anything big. Like, if your goal is to lose weight, then your habit number 1 might be, I'm going to drink 2 liters of water today.
Yes.
And just to say, you know what? I'm going to execute that. And you know how easy it is? I'm going to fill up a 2-liter jug every morning. And I'm going to empty that jug, even if I don't empty it in a smooth, continuous, every 2-hour kind of way. Mm-hmm. Just empty the jug, right? And then the habits that come in with that will eventually spill itself over to, okay, I feel slightly better, and I definitely have my joints don't ache as much, for example, just from hydration alone. And then the result of that, like, hey, okay, I've got this habit nailed. This is easy. Filling up a jug of water is nothing. It's just what I do every night.
Yes. Right.
Right.
Yes.
And then you go, okay, let's add a second habit. Right. And you could, maybe it's a podcast you listen to. You're like, you know what? Such a great idea. Oh, you know what? That's a great meal prep idea that is really convenient for me. Or that's a great meal prep idea, but that's not going to work. How about if I did this? Because that fits into my daily habits and that fits into my daily lifestyle. But at the end of the day, we still got a meal prep situation set up.
Yes.
Right. And then as a result, then you can start taking those steps. So, and that's just nutritionally. But for me, like, for example, moving better, I get up every morning, and I would say at least 5 days a week, unless I'm really pushed for time, I very rarely don't do some form of mobility technique in the morning. And it changes. It's not always the same, but it's very, like, almost always first thing out of bed, I literally go to the washroom. After the washroom, I push the coffee button, and right after the coffee button, I go to the floor. It's going to take about 5 minutes for that coffee to brew. I go to the floor and I have a 5-minute time for myself. Sometimes it's breathing, sometimes it's mobility work, sometimes it's vibration with the Hyperice products, and it really doesn't matter. I'm going to do what I feel is necessary to take my next steps in the day, which is have a bit of blood flow, have a little bit of energy, and then feel like when I get up from the ground, there's a bit of spring back in my step, that I feel like I'm able to go do whatever I want to do right now, pain-free.
Amazing.
Ache-free.
Yes. Yeah. And
those habits just make me feel great.
Right. No, that's perfect. And I think that we can continue to look at the technical aspects of what you did, but I'd love to hear you say more about that one piece of me glazed over so quickly, gratitude.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit more about that in this process of establishing these habits?
Yep. So one of them, I don't know if you know this or not, but one of my degrees is actually in psychology. So I have a master's degree in kinesiology. I have an undergrad in physical education, but also have a science degree in psychology.
Okay.
So, yeah. So one of the things you learn is positive reinforcement.
Yes.
And the key ingredient, and the reason why I do speak about this gratitude piece, is that there's two parts of it. One, you're going to feel better when you do the habits that you've established for yourself. Mm-hmm. That's step one. That's the instantaneous gratitude, which is really important.
Yes.
You're going to get it au naturel, but if you self-reflect on that gratitude, then you actually make a long-term memory connection to it. So there's a short-term memory. Oh, I feel better, which is great. And that's one of the key ingredients to actually establishing a new set of behaviors. But in order to link it into your long-term memory or working in long-term memories, you actually have to reflect on it in a way where you can re-experience that moment.
Yes.
Because you're in that position and at a different time of day. So now you have two touch points for, basically, to be honest, I mean, I'm just speaking to it from a purely technical perspective. Yes. You're going to feel better. You're going to move better throughout the day, and you self-reflect back on that position, and it's going to make you want to do it again. And then eventually those habits actually start to form. So we talk about the fact that it's going to take anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months in order to be able to build a new set of habits. The reality is the more steps you take in terms of both short-term and long-term positive reinforcement, yes, the quicker that habit formation is going to occur.
Okay. Yeah. So being intentional with
the gratitude. Yeah. The gratitude piece of it obviously makes you feel better again. It's another way to be positively reinforced. And it's a great way to finish your day or to reflect upon a portion of your day, especially if things aren't going the way you want to go.
Right.
Because sometimes it's really important to just take a moment and go, remember how I felt this morning because I did this.
Yes.
Even though I don't feel that way right now, and it'll bring you back to that place too. So there's so many intricate parts of this psychologically, yes, that are incredibly important for people to take part in. So
does writing it down make a difference?
I think so for everybody it's different because some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, and some people are a combination of the two. So like the reality is anything that allows you to represent that in your mind properly. So if you're really, for me personally, I'm a very visual guy. So writing it down creates a much stronger visual connection for me versus like me just thinking about it. So if I practice a lot, it's like meditation, like anything else. If I practice a lot, I get very good at visualizing my morning. So for right now, if I was to close my eyes and think back to what I did this morning because I did use the hypervolt on myself. If I was to go back and look at that process, I could visualize me start to finish doing what I did this morning. Mm-hmm. And the more I do that, the more succinct and accurate my visualizations become. So if you practice visualization, it works really well, and you'll get that same visual representation. Yes. The lowest hanging fruits to write it down. Yes. Put it in a place that you're going to see it on a daily. Yes. So that's what a lot of people do. I prefer to try and reflect it in my brain because I know it's a weakness, so I try and strengthen it.
That. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think, the other part to that with those moments of gratitude is having a point of reference when things don't go right. So you can remember last time I was able to succeed here. So like a video game, like you need some checkpoints along the way. So when you die, you go back to that checkpoint. You don't actually start all over again. You can say, okay, I was here, successfully here. Let's build off of that last successful checkpoint instead of getting discouraged along the way.
So just before we switch off of that, I just want to say that usually when I'm doing those physical things that make me feel better, I also try and link in one psychological thing. So one thing that I want to achieve in today. So I'll often link the act that's outside of fitness to the fitness act, because the fitness act for me is always going to make me feel great. It's always going to make me feel better. So I try and partner it with something else that I've got to work on today that I really want to try and improve. or take a step forward in. And then again, that's the sort of like attaching of positive reinforcement to something that maybe isn't as joyful of a moment for me,
right,
in the sense that I know it's going to take work, but it's work towards a purpose. And so therefore I try and sync the two together. So it's if I don't do that, I'll probably still have a great day as a result of doing the habits that I have in the mornings, but syncing the two together is a huge impact maker. And you just it's just something you do.
Yes.
And if you do it enough, it doesn't feel strange whatsoever. And in fact, it almost always sets you up for success for the day.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's rich. That's really is rich. Can you talk about your conference this weekend, or your workshop?
So it's actually next weekend.
Oh, next weekend. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay. So I think 4 months in May. It was in May. It was one of the first conference after COVID had hit. I think we all went through a phase where there was a little bit of a fog, I would imagine, where maybe we weren't diving into self-improvement or diving into making changes in our lives that were going to set us up post-COVID. And then I got to May, and I remember seeing, so his name is Dr. Robert Schlepp. I remember seeing a post from him, he's I would say like a colleague / mentor of mine, someone that I've looked up to for a very long time in the field of fascial research, in the field of what's called fascial fitness, which I'm sure you've heard me use those terms before, but he was hosting a conference, an online conference. And I was so excited because usually they have the fascial research conference once a year, which this year was supposed to be in Montreal, which obviously is being postponed or being done virtually. I haven't seen the update yet. But he was hosting his own because of all of his collaborations with contacts throughout the industry with some of the top fascial researchers around the planet, because he could do it virtually. Right. And he found this online platform, et cetera, et cetera. So I remember saying to myself, you know what, Chad, it's time to come out of the fog. And this was early May, and I'm going to dedicate 2 days. I have the time.
Yes.
And I remember it flipped my whole mindset. So I know it's a bit of a long story,
take your time.
But it flipped my whole mindset to, I'm going to use this time to come out a stronger educator. I'm going to use this time to pivot and understand the virtual platforms. I'm going to use this time to really dig deep into an area that sometimes I don't have time to dig deep into, or I haven't dug in deep into recently. So I did that conference. So that was 2 days. It was on a Wednesday and a Friday, 4 hours at an absurd time of day. Well, that wasn't too absurd because they did a pretty good job of making sure that it was within a time frame that would allow those of us over here in North America, because it originated out of Germany.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was able to watch a conference in Germany.
Right.
Yeah. And then I was so inspired by the content that I said, and what was happening, I went to CanFit Pro and I said, guys, we really should create a mini conference. Like I think it's time. People are listening. I think people are now ready because they're just bored with feeling sorry for themselves in the situation that COVID has created for them.
Right.
And we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, who knew it was going to keep going this long? But so I created my own mini conference. So I brought in Dr. Robert Schlepp, and I brought in Dan McDonough, and I brought in Kevin Hendry, and I brought in another colleague of mine, Michelle Dalcourt, who actually is the guy who developed the Viper. Some of the most genuine, intelligent people I know.
Absolutely.
And I was so excited. And then I had another colleague of mine who may actually be on here, Kim Bond, offer to help me out and help me administrate the whole process.
Yes.
So I'm so happy about the process and how it went, and my ability to be able to pull together these colleagues from all over the planet, that I said to myself, well, what did I learn in the first conference with Dr. Schlepp and the Fascial Research Conference that is aligned with my own personal philosophy of moving better, that I really could bring forward to the universe? And in a way, there's so many backstories to this, but the reality is I came up with this idea that, you know what, I'm just going to talk about improving athleticism at all ages.
Yes.
And then I'm going to talk about it from a sort of a sciencey perspective of there's contractile elements and there's fascial elements inside the body, connective tissue elements, and try and bring the industry to a better understanding that when you train a certain way, you train different elements of the neuromuscular system. And that ultimately at the end of the day, all the components need to be trained at all times. And this is that general concept called athleticism.
Yes.
But if you train one way, for example, if you just do bodybuilding type methods, or if you just do powerlifting methods, or if you just do yoga, for example, you're going to train some of the elements more than the other elements. So my idea was like, let me show you what this general concept of athleticism actually is, what its fundamental science, right, exercise physiology components are, and then how we can actually then take it into the practical real world and use it in ways that might be a slightly different training paradigm than you're used to.
Right. Beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
And so therefore that's where I came up with this whole idea. I'm going to show people that we can put together these successful training routines that will allow you to safely and effectively move at a better level than you did before the workout and reduce the likelihood of injury while doing so.
Awesome.
So I was just like, you know what? Everyone should benefit from this.
Yes. Well,
and I don't care where you are on the continuum, but that's why. So the whole idea behind the lecture that I'm going to be doing, that was a paid lecture 2 months ago, I'm going to give for free because I'm so passionate about helping people understand that athleticism isn't only for athletes, that it's for all people, and that everybody should want to spring in their step.
Yes, absolutely. I always said to all of my clients that you are an athlete, and they always laugh it off. I believe everyone is an athlete, and your sport may be chasing your grandkids around the house, or maybe trying to get a full scholarship, but that still is a level of athleticism.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. 3 of the words, the terms that you had on your little promo for it was elastic capacity, building resilience, and preventing decay.
Right.
Those are also, I think those are like character things as well as muscular things, if you think about it. But
yes.
Can you talk about elastic capacity, first of all?
Yeah. So the best way to sort of like break it down, I appreciate you obviously bringing this up, because a lot of people, you're born without elasticity in your body, and you often die without elasticity in your body, and for completely different reasons. So the thing is that we have this layer over top of the body. I like to refer to it as the human body's Spanx system. We have this ubiquitous tissue throughout our body that was, not looked at, not examined, not cared for very much until the last sort of decade. We've known about it for a long time, but we've never really known what to do with it or known how alive it was and how integral it was to our body. And it's called fascia.
Yes.
Now it's a key buzzword now. Everyone knows what fascia is, but the reality is, like, our understanding of fascia is changing on the daily. And what we do know, though, it just keeps our body together, but it also gives our body that resilient spring mechanism. It's designed to, if you pull on a rubber band, when you pull, the rubber band snaps back into place. Mm-hmm. So when you pull on muscle, if you over pull muscle, it breaks. Right. So I'll give you a perfect example. And I wish I had the tube in my hand right now, but you know the tubing, Martin, that's out there in the industry now, where there's a small piece of rubber tube inside of 2 handles, but it has a nylon coating over top.
Over it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the sleeve is kind of your fascial system.
Gotcha.
In the sense that it has a whole bunch of give in it. It has a bunch of give, but it tends to snap back. Mm-hmm. So before your muscle itself, the contractile elements of the body actually get to fully extended position where they're at risk of ripping and tearing at the tendon, this natural spandex system that we had inside the body goes to tension and snaps it back into place. Okay. So we have this natural built-in mechanism to make sure our body never ever gets to its end range of motion where tearing could occur, or that most of the load is taken up in the elastic system early on in a muscle contraction to prevent heavy load from going into the tendon where ruptures and major deficit could occur. Because really the reality is, like, if you were to go back into our caveman version of ourselves where there is no doctor, there is no hospital, right. If you tore a tendon, like your Achilles tendon, and I hate to say I've seen a real life example of this in hate crime, is that when people were in the genocide area over in South Africa, which was crazy, they were cutting people's Achilles tendon
first. Yeah.
Right, which is wild. And the reason being is that you basically maimed the animal. And if you maim the animal, they're going to die. Yeah. Which is it's crazy. But that's the reason why the tendon system is so abruptly protected inside the body. And our fascial system protects tendons and major ruptures and tear, because in the world that our body was architected to work from, if you were maimed, you likely couldn't provide for yourself or your family, and therefore were very likely to die.
Yes.
So our body's got a naturally built-in system that recovers relatively quickly, that prevents major injury inside the body, and it's very trainable, and we've just left it alone for years and years and years,
Right.
not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, we peeled it back to look at the muscles.
Yeah, which is wild.
Yeah. It's crazy. Eh?
Yeah.
And then the second part of that is just resilience.
Yep. So resilience, obviously, again, the whole idea is that you have to progressively challenge yourself, your mind, your body, your spirit, in order to be able to take on any number of situations in life's sport and fitness. So the idea of resilience is simple, is that the more varied your daily training, your daily activities are, the more likely you are to enable yourself to be put into situations that are somewhat unique and walk away from it without injury or walk away from it without major consequence. So resilience in a sense is just expose your tissue in a progressively overloaded manner in such a way that your body has a body armor that is protected to do whatever it wants to do. It can react in sport as necessary and not get injured. It could go to a yoga class and stretch its muscles to reasonable lengths and not get injured. You can bounce back the next day and repeat the processes because your body is adept at responding and fixing itself over time, and or responding and preventing itself from being injured.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's all about progression, right? And as simple as that term sounds, and I probably didn't articulate that very well, as simple as that term resilience sounds, it's very difficult to do unless you have very varied experiences in life, sport, and fitness. And unfortunately, most of our experiences in fitness, for example, are machine-based, and they're very strategic in terms of their movement pattern.
Yes.
And
very linear.
Very linear, very structured, very protected.
Yes.
Which is great. If you're first exposing yourself to tissue overload, then it's good to start in a very protected. So if you think about partial range of motion, lower speeds of range of motion, lower loads in the range of motion, lower complexity, and minimal amounts of fatigue, because those are the kind of things that lead to injury or overuse.
Yes.
And tissue repair that's not easily overcome. So building resilience from too much overload is difficult because you actually break the structures down so much that the fixing takes either too long or it actually is detrimental in terms of acute injury.
Yes.
So the reality is the resilience part is not as simple as it sounds. And as much as a lot of people would like to speak to the fact that some types of training are less desirable than others to build resilience, it doesn't mean that type of training, say, for example, linear machine-based training, isn't an important step in the journey, because it might be a safe first step for someone to start building up some load, some load tolerance. Right. But load tolerance can be done in multiple directions, multiple angles, can be specific for sport. It could help you just successfully perform life activities like gardening or picking up and playing with your babies in random acts. Like, just a quick on this is like, if you haven't, like for me, I have a young 8-year-old in my life now as part of my relationship that I have, and you get to experience a whole bunch of different movements and activities when you're playing with an 8-year-old that are often very random in nature.
Right. Yes.
And if you're not ready for that, you're likely to get injured.
Right.
To be honest. Yeah. I mean, this guy, for example, jumps on me in every possible direction in every possible circumstance. And if my body isn't ready to accept that load, I would have been injured 8 times ago. But the reality is, that's why I'm talking about resilience, is that I can jump into an activity with Declan. I can jump into an activity. I could go out and play football right now. Like if you asked me to go outside, if I was to do a little bit of a warm up, I could definitely run a route and catch a football.
Well, it's funny, yeah.
But I'm almost 50.
Right. Well, I was going to use the football as an example for that predictable movement patterns, because football is my background too. So, and not to take away from the offense, but I played defense. And if I got hurt, I felt like my hamstrings a little twinge and stuff, I'd go and play offense because I'm in control of the pattern I'm going to run, instead of having to make a sudden reaction to the offensive player. I'm not in control of that chaotic movement anymore. Right. So there's a sense of being in control of those chaotic, unpredictable movements that you're talking about in terms of resilience with our muscles, our fascia, our movement patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. If our body's built, again, with enough varied experiences and that we continue to vary up the movements throughout our day, the likelihood of us having success increases. And by success, I mean, A, being able to defend the opponent, but also B, not get injured while doing it. And there's so many levels of success, right? So the reality is, like, it's not as easy as it sounds. And it's just much easier to go into the gym, for example, and just do basic movement patterns. A, it's comfortable. B, you can turn your brain off. C, you're not likely to get injured. And you don't have to have a lot of, I would say, prior knowledge to be able to do it. But that's low-hanging fruit. It isn't the pathway to movement success. It is pathway to ease of execution, but it isn't going to set you up for success outside of those training environments, which most people like get injured doing things like picking up a remote from a TV or going out for skiing or water skiing in the summer, for example. Right. And those things that they assume their body's set up for success for is absolutely wrong and not the case at all.
Right, exactly. And the example I've used many times is if you were to go bowling today, and we haven't bowled in 15 years since some kid's birthday party, our lats are going to be sore, so our shoulders are going to be sore, our forearms going to be jacked up. It's like, I'm in shape. Why is bowling hurting me right now? Like, it's not a familiar movement pattern.
Picking up groceries out of the car, picking up a suitcase when you're at well, not that many people are flying right now, but like if you're at the airport picking up a suit, those are all the kinds of activities that your body's not ready for unless you load it in unpredictable, unique ways. Yes. And that's, I know this is beyond the scope of today, but the seminar I'm doing will actually go into the practices that come along with building tissue resilience in all these different directions and ways.
Yeah, amazing. And I just want to get to the comments here. Like Kim mentioned, yes, like basketball is harder than it looks. And that's exactly it, because you got to, I think of all the sports, I have friends who argue that basketball players are the best athletes because everybody on the court has to run, jump, turn, stop, pivot, like pivot in ways that we don't teach people to turn, lean, pivot, reach, because you hurt your back. Well, you need to do that for basketball. So, yeah, exactly. That's a tough sport for the demands of the body. Exactly.
All the team sports. I don't know if you know this, Martin, but I actually was the strength and conditioning coach for the national women's team going into 2012.
Yes.
So when they went to London. So, yeah, I mean, I'm always amazed by team sport athletes and their resilience.
Yes.
The practice habits, the game, right? The games themselves, the sport, the amount of demands put on their body psychologically and physically, and how they're able to bounce back from it. And obviously they have a lot of help. They get a lot of support from all the right people in their IST teams, which is their, interdisciplinary service providers. But the reality is, like, it's incredible what these team sport athletes can do and how the bodies are able to respond and bounce back to perform over and over and over. And we've gotten much better at preparing people for those types of things. And that's where my background is. Yeah. But I also say to myself, well, how can I take that athletic background, those things that we do naturally athletically, and then help people have a life full of athleticism?
Yes.
As opposed to athleticism ending when sport ends.
Right. Exactly. That's my passion as well. And Joseph Pilates put it really simply to say, like, ease of movement. And that was the whole point of his exercise system, was to give people ease of movement in everyday life.
Yep.
Right. So the athlete can do something that looks easy for him on the court. We want to have that same ease of movement in our everyday lives, in every task that's required of us.
Yep, absolutely.
Just as we close out here, any closing thoughts, your message for your people at this time? I'm really excited about your conference, but just in general, just some takeaways.
I think, honestly, for me, and I again just want to say thank you for having me on here, Martin. I do. When I first met you, I was inspired by you in different ways too. Just to be clear, like, it's very obvious that your passion for movement is there. Your knowledge about movement was high. Your appetite to continue to learn and strive to be a better version of yourself is super clear to me. So again, having someone like yourself, who I consider a peer, bring me on here actually means a lot to me. So before I don't say that, I want to make sure that's covered off, because I think you're an incredible human who's making a difference in this industry. So thanks again for doing that. As far as my closing comments go, to be honest, the reality is I'm just here to be a portal of information to allow people to be a better version of themselves. And if in my particular case, a lot of my strengths and knowledge are around movement and around daily habits. So that's where I've realized that my niche is. I realize that that's where my impact is going to be. I realize that that's where I can passionately deliver the message. So anything I can do to support anybody who's on part of your community to help them move better. Any questions, absolutely accept it. I'm really lucky to have gone this far in life without any major pain and any major physical consequences. I do believe that, you know, there's some genetic component to it, but I also believe that it's been my lifelong passion for movement and athleticism that has taken me down this path, as well as a purpose. And at the end of the day, like, no matter what you're doing, guys, right now, find purpose in your day. And if you can find a way to help yourself move more effectively through your own personal journey in any kind of way, just do it. Do it. Be grateful. Be thankful. Enjoy the fact that you have a body that's able to move. And to be honest, push the envelope, push its limits a little bit, but do so safely and enjoy the ride, because you're going to feel better all the way through that process.
Amen. All about purpose. Thanks, Kim. Awesome. Chad, thank you so much for your time today, man. I can't express how much I appreciate this time. Just a great mover, a great thinker, and a great influence in this world. So appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and excusing my 7 a.m. babble a little bit.
It's all good, man.